Well, folks, this is an incredible story. It's a story that attracts 400,000 people a year from all over the world come through that gate. The vast majority of them, 90% of the time, never been here in their lives. I'd like to see who you are this morning. If you've never been here in your life, please put your hand up. Now hold it way up. Now just look around. It's always the same. 90% of the folks come here, never been here in their life, and yet except for these little tykes over here, there's nobody in this audience who's never heard of George Armstrong Custer. There's nobody in this audience who's never heard of Sitting Bull or Crazy Horse. And I promise you this, there's nobody here who's never heard of Elvis Presley. Well, folks, it's a simple story, and yet it's a complex story. You are on the battlefield right now, and it stretches 5 miles to the south of us, well beyond the notch in the hill way out there. 5 miles. On June 25th, 1876, George Armstrong Custer with 647 troops will attack a massive camp located about 1.5 to 2 miles to the south of us, down in the river valley bottom. There's 8,000 people in that village. 1,500 to 2,000 of them are warriors. Custer's going to have 647 troops. It's the only battlefield in the country, only one of two in the whole world, where white markers indicate where soldiers were killed on the battlefield and buried where they fell. Red markers, like the one at the mouth of Deep Ravine, just to the left of this gentleman. 17 warrior markers across the battlefield. Much more warriors died in the fight. But we've got 17 markers placed there by oral histories and families. They're not buried on the battlefield. They're picked up very quickly and later buried in trees and caves and scaffolding. On top, Apocalypse at Little Bighorn, Custer's final battle. How did this happen? Why did it happen? Well, folks, it's really a culminating event because it marks nearly 400 years of cultural animosity, cultural friction, cultural disdain between Euro-Americans and Native Americans, and the fight was always over the same thing. Land. Land. Who would occupy it, how it would be used, and who will be allowed to traverse across it. Because you see, when Euro-Americans come out west, they see huge expanses of territory, and they see grass and water and timber and minerals in the ground, particularly that yellow metal that makes a white man go crazy. And when they see all of these resources, they envision farms and towns, ranches, railroads, telegraphs, Cheryl, and barbed wire fences. All of it driven by a near religion called manifest destiny. Manifest destiny, the belief that somehow Euro-Americans are sanctioned, they're ordained by God to spread across the continent. Conquer it, subdue it, tame it, from coast to coast, from sea to shining sea. There's just one problem with that vision. There's people already here. And they have their own vision of what life should be like. And I'm going to argue this, they're the freest people on earth. Because when they get horses in the early 1700s, they can go from Mexico to Canada in pursuit of huge herds of the 1,400-pound super walking Walmart store of the plains. Food, shelter, clothing, weapons, utensils, fuel, medicines, and about 50 other uses. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, in 1840, there are 60 million buffalo on the plains. And by 1890, less than 500 left on the planet. When Euro-Americans come out west, they want to turn the Sioux and the Cheyenne and the Arapaho and the Blackfoot and the Crow, they want to turn them into Christian farmers. Well, Sitting Bull's not about to bend over and scratch and claw at the ground with a hoe to try to make a living. And Crazy Horse is not going to surrender his pony and hook it up to a plow. They're hunters and they're warriors. And that's their vision. Folks, in the mid-1870s, 1873, there's an economic crisis. The stock market crashes. The banking system rolls over. The panic of 1873. People are losing their jobs, their life savings. There's 20% unemployment. Does any of that ring a bell? It's tough times in America. Ulysses S. Grant is the President of the United States. He's going to have to rev up the economy or he's not going to get reelected. He needs an economic stimulus package. And George Custer is going to provide it. Gold in the Black Hills. The summer of '74, Custer leads an expedition into the Black Hills, western South Dakota. Rumors of gold had persisted for years, but now it is a reality. There's gold in the Black Hills. Newspaper reports say all you got to do is walk through the grass and pick up nuggets off the tops of your shoes. Miners, prospectors, entrepreneurs pour into the hills. Overnight, Deadwood, 3,000-4,000 people real quick. Every one of them is an illegal alien because the Black Hills belong to the Sioux. Guaranteed by the Treaty of 1868, a white man's promise. No white people allowed in the Black Hills. Wild Bill Hickok shot in the back of the head playing cards in number 10 Saloon in Deadwood. He's an illegal alien. So's his friend Calamity Jane. Because the Sioux call the hills Paha Sapa, sacred ground. Literal translation, the hills are black with timber. Well, President Grant sees an opportunity there. He wants to get at that gold, rev up the economy, create jobs, put money in the treasury. So he's going to try to buy the Black Hills. $7 million, that's a lot of money. But Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, Ice, Lame White Man, others, no, not for sale. You don't sell the ground that your ancestors walked on and now their bones lie beneath. Not for sale. Well, how about if we lease them? We'll give them back when we're done. No thanks. In frustration, Grant hands the problem over to the War Department, the architects of a military campaign to sweep the Sioux back onto reservations in the Dakotas. It's going to be designed by two old Civil War comrades, William Tecumseh Sherman and Phil Sheridan. If you remember, folks, those two old boys burned down half the South in the war between the states. They know what total war is, and they're going to try to wage it again on the northern plains. They're going to issue an ultimatum to the Sioux. It's pretty straightforward. It goes like this. Get out of the Black Hills. Get out of the Powder River country. Get out of the Rosebud country. And go back to your respective reservations in the Dakotas and stay there. And do so by January 31st, 1876, because if you don't, you're going to be considered hostile. And the army will come and get you and force you to return. Runners are sent out to inform the villages of this edict, but it's a bitter winter, the winter of 75 and 76. Howling winds, drifting snow, 45 below zero, not uncommon on the northern plains. You're not going to move a village. There's no grass for the ponies. But more commanding than the weather itself is the counsel from Sitting Bull, who says to the people, don't go back. Don't go back to that reservation and make yourself a slave to a piece of fat bacon and some coffee and sugar. Stay out. Live like a real Indian while you still can. Hunt buffalo while they still exist. He knew the sun was going down, and so they stayed out. They didn't go back. And by the early spring, those who'd wintered on the agencies began to trickle off and reinforce Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse out here. And by the early summer, they're pouring off the reservations. So much so that once again we've got this village 2 miles to the south of us, 8,000 people in it, 1,500 to 2,000 warriors. They're not going back to bad flour and rotten meat and starvation on the reservation. They're going to stay out here. The stage is set. 8 o'clock in the morning, George Armstrong Custer is up on those Wolf Mountains, way out there on the far horizon, 15 miles out, a place called the Crow's Nest. His scouts, Arikaras and crows, have gotten up on top there, and they've looked down in the wee hours of the morning, and they've seen smoke rising from the teepees. They think it's a big camp. They go get Custer. He doesn't believe him. He wants to see for himself. He goes up to the Crow's Nest at 8 o'clock in the morning, looks down into the valley with a cheap spyglass. But he can't see a thing because the breakfast campfires have turned the valley into Los Angeles. The scouts tell him look for worms in the grass. Well, folks, the Little Bighorn River's right below us, that thick green line of trees at the bottom of the ridge. Across the valley to the second line of trees, above those trees on the bluffs of the morning of the 25th, there's 20,000 horses grazing. 20,000 worms in the grass. Custer can't see him. The scouts are very alarmed. You better not go down there. You don't have enough bullets in your whole command to fight the Sioux. But other scouts see it differently. You better attack because that village is going to run. They're going to scatter. They're not going to fight. Custer's favorite scout, Bloody Knife, and Arikara, says to him in sign, General, if you and I go down there today, we'll go home on a road we've never walked before. Custer says, I think we can get through all of them. Fearless, aggressive, relentless, vain, arrogant, overconfident, a glory hunter. Well, folks, for 137 years, he's been judged by one battle. His last one. However, the record shows that he has been in battle after battle after fight after battle in the American Civil War. 100 engagements. He's had 11 horses shot right out from underneath him. Saber charges. No scars. Sometimes he's so far out ahead of his men, he's in Confederate territory all by himself. When Lee surrenders to Grant in the spring of '65, surrender documents are signed, ceremonies concluded. When it's all over with, Phil Sheridan picks up the table that the documents were signed on, later presents it to Elizabeth Custer with these words, I don't know of anyone who has played a greater role than ending this tragic conflict than your gallant husband. That table is in the Smithsonian today. Aggressive, fearless, relentless, legendary, the boy general, Brigadier 23, Major General 26. He leads thousands of men into battle time after time after time. His success, the adulation he receives, the recognition, is going to contribute to his death certificate on the back of that ridge. Custer decides he's going to attack. He orders Captain Frederick Benteen off to the south to scout with 120 men, 3 companies. Benteen hates Custer's guts, has no use for him. Benteen questions his orders. General, if this village is as big as they say it is, we're going to need every man we've got. You have your orders, Benteen. Follow them. You're dismissed. Benteen hates Custer. Custer hates Benteen. Reno hates both of them. Reno and Custer come off the divide 12 miles out, 7 miles out, 3 miles out from the river crossing. The scout Girard sees 60 warriors racing towards the village in the north. He screams out, "There go your Indians, General, and they're running like devils." Custer sends an immediate order to Major Marcus Reno, second in command. Major Reno, the village is just ahead and running away. Move forward at as rapid a gait as you deem prudent. Pitch into anything. Sweep everything before you. And you'll be supported by the whole outfit. Reno crosses the stream. He cinches up his equipment, tightens his saddle girths, and charges down the valley towards the massive camp 4 miles beyond. He's got 140 men. Inside the village, it's chaos. They didn't expect to fight. They're caught off guard. When the village criers see the soldiers, they scream out, "Ota! Ota! Ota! The chargers are coming! The long knives, the blue coats!" Old women hobbling on sticks, trying to get away. Young mothers frantically racing around, trying to find their children who are swimming and playing. Inside the camp, Sitting Bull, 45 years old, spirit warrior, too old to fight, but not to lead. He exhorts the warriors on. Brave up! Brave up! Strong hearts to the front, cowards to the rear. Ho-ka-hey, it's a good day to die. 14, 15-year-olds race out of the village on horseback. They tie sagebrush to the backs of their ponies' tails and ride back and forth, creating a giant dust cloud. As Reno thunders down the valley faster and faster and faster, at 700 yards, he knows two things. Number one, the village is not running away. And number two, he's never fought the Sioux and the Cheyenne before. At 400 yards, he will scream out, "Halt! Dismount! Form skirmish lines now! Fight on foot!" 140 men attempt to rein their horses in at 20 miles an hour. Private Smith and Turley, two city boys. They don't know how to ride too well. They can't even stop. They go right into the camp. Their heads later found on poles. 138 men dig in. Every fourth man is a horse holder. He takes his horse and three others, pulls them off the battle line, back into the timber along the river, protect horses and ammunition from the advancing warriors. Now that cuts down the firing line to 90 soldiers spread across the valley floor in 5-yard intervals, skirmish line formation. And in 10 minutes, they'll face 600 warriors. The company commanders order volley fire. They take their big bore Springfield carbine, 45-55 trapdoor single shot. It shoots a big bullet. And if it hits you, you're going down. And most likely some of your anatomy is going to fall off. They open the trap, drop the cartridge into the breech, close the trap, cock the weapon, ready, aim, fire. Boom! 90 guns go off. Open the trap, eject the spent cartridge, throw a fresh round in, close the trap, cock the weapon, ready, aim, fire. Boom! Another 90 rounds go off. Big bullets rumbling into the village, crashing into the teepees, and dropping some of them on the ground. Inside the village, a warrior named Gall. Gall is painting himself up for war. He's 6 feet tall, and he weighs 250 pounds. His 2 wives and 3 daughters are killed by Reno's charge. When he found out, he said, "It made my heart bad, and I fought back with a hatchet." Gall, Crow King, Two Moon, Low Dog, Crazy Horse, they roar out of the village like angry bees out of a hive and slam into Reno. After 20 minutes, Reno collapses and falls back into the timber. He digs in for a second stand, but now the warriors light the grass on fire behind him. They snap buffalo blankets and run off his horses. He's feeling very, very uncomfortable. He finally screams out to the scout Bloody Knife, "Bloody Knife, what are the Indians going to do?" Boom! Bloody Knife takes a bullet right in the head. His hot brains and blood go all over Reno's face. Right then and there, Major Marcus Reno invented the modern term, post-traumatic stress syndrome. He barks out conflicting orders, "Mount, dismount, mount." Guys are going up and down. And then he screams out, "Those who want to make their escape and live, follow me." He crashes out of the timber, races back towards the river 4 miles beyond. Other soldiers are trying to catch up. It's a rout. There's no attempt to cover the retreat at all. Warriors race up next to the fleeing soldiers and pump their Winchester and Henry repeating rifles into the command. Bow, 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 bow. Two Moon said, "We mowed the soldiers down." It was like a buffalo hunt. We came up behind the soldiers. We slipped our bowstrings over the soldiers' heads and jerked them off their horses, pounded them with clubs and took their guns. And we counted coup, which means to touch an enemy with a stick. You're not brave. Why are you here? You did not bring enough soldiers. You better go back and get more. 40 men will die in this race with death through a gauntlet of hell. They get to the river crossing. Horses plunge off the bank, crash into the stream, flounder, and men drowned. Warriors on top of the ridges rain bullets into the crossing. Ladies and gentlemen, the river was red with blood. This was war. It wasn't cowboys and Indians. It wasn't John Wayne. It was war. Reno scratches and thrashes across the river, climbs out onto the bank, gets on top of the high ground 5 miles to the south of us. This road will take you right to it. He is a fractured commander, and his battalion is whipped and demoralized. About 10 minutes later, Captain Benteen approaches Reno on the high bluff after scouting to the south. He sees Reno and snarls, "Where's Custer?" Reno says, "I don't know where Custer is, but for God's sake, Benteen, halt your command and help me. I've lost half my men." Benteen has a message in his pocket. It's from Custer, delivered to Benteen on the back trail by Giovanni Martini, the Italian orderly of the day who has a real tough time with English. Benteen hands a note to Reno. It reads, "Benteen, come quick. Come on, big village. Bring packs. P.S. Bring packs. Ammunition packs." Neither one of those officers is going to respond with any sense of urgency to that order, and it will haunt them for the rest of their days. In the meantime, Custer advances to the north with 5 companies, 209 men. He tries to go down off the ridge and cross the river at Medicine Tail Coulee. 2.5 miles to the south of us, it's a low point in the valley, a freeway crossing into the Cheyenne camp, but Cheyenne warriors slam the gate closed. Custer has to retreat and fall back up the ridge where all 5 companies gather at a place called Calhoun Hill. Today, if you'll lend me your eyes, I want to show you where that is. Okay, we've got the monument. We go south along the monument. We see that SUV on the ridge. By the way, that wasn't here in '76. On there is Calhoun Hill. James Calhoun, Custer's brother-in-law. With about 85 soldiers, he forms a skirmish line facing the south. And for 45 minutes, he flails away trying to hold warriors back. But then Gall, Crow King, Two Moon, Low Dog, Crazy Horse, after pounding Reno into hopeless submission, they peel off of Reno, roar down, and slam into Calhoun Hill like a red tidal wave. Company L and James Calhoun are blown off the ridge. 1,000 yards out in front of us, C Company mounts their horses and charges down the hill, driving warriors back. They dismount and form a skirmish line and fire into the fleeing warriors. Temporarily, there's a change in momentum. But a Southern Cheyenne chief named Lame White Man, he gets off his horse in the middle of the battlefield, turns to the fleeing warriors and says, "Come back! Come back! There's not that many soldiers. We can kill them all." They rally up behind Lame White Man, storm back up the ridge, and crash into C Company. They snap buffalo blankets and run off C Company horses, and they kill their horse holders. Most of the C Company boys are cut down, those few left alive, unhorsed, and they run to the top of Battle Ridge. Hordes of warriors race down the west side of the river and cross right below us at Deep Ravine. They pound up the ridge 200 yards out in front of us and go right up on top of the ridge. They look down, hearing gunfire on the other side, and they see Crazy Horse. Crazy Horse is fearless, aggressive, relentless, and he is hostile to any white intrusion into the Powder River country. He's also 36 years old, the same age as Custer, and he has no fear. Because as a kid, he's had a vision. The Great Spirit comes to him in a dream at the age of 14 and says, you're to protect your people. Bullets and arrows will never harm you. You will not die from a bullet or an arrow. But be humble. Don't boast or brag. Don't draw attention to yourself. A very tough assignment in a warrior culture that's much like the NFL. Crazy Horse charges down the ridge and goes right into the teeth of Miles Keogh, the Fighting Irishman, Company I commander. 45 dismounted skirmishers fire at Crazy Horse. Bow! And they don't hit him. They reload a second time. White Bull does a bravery run right in front of Keogh. Bow! And they don't hit him either. The other warriors, inspired by the courage of Crazy Horse and White Bull, charge down the ridge, slam into Keogh, and grind Company I into gall, who's overrun Calhoun Hill from the south. Company I ceases to exist. The only remnants of the firefight, 45 white tombstones on the other side of the hill, they look like ghosts in a lunch line. One survivor, a horse named Comanche. Miles Keogh's horse, shot full of holes, leaking blood all over the prairie. They find it down by the river sucking in water, but more is leaking out than it can take in. The horse is put on the boat far west, taken back to Fort Abraham Lincoln. That horse will live another 16 years. Never ridden again. The only time a saddle touches that horse's back is in a funeral with boots pointed backwards. And by the way, folks, that horse ate apple pie whenever it wanted. It's resting in a glass case now in Lawrence, Kansas. Calhoun is dead. Keogh crushed. Lieutenant Colonel Custer swings out beyond us with probably 80 soldiers. He's going to go out through the current cemetery, drop down off the ridge, try to cross the river and capture the women and children and screaming old people who have fled to the north to escape Reno's charge. Lots of warrior accounts testify to this maneuver. But he can't get across the river. Once again, veteran Sioux and Cheyennes turn him around. He has to fight his way back up through here, where he drives warriors off the top of the hill and digs in where the monument now stands, about the same time that Keogh caves in. And as I said, folks, at the very beginning, now the full fury of 1,500 to 2,000 warriors will bear down onto Last Stand Hill. The sky is raining arrows, gunfire, smoke, yelling, screaming, cursing, warriors getting closer and closer. Tumu, a Cheyenne chief. We swirled around the soldiers like water around a stone. Gall, the soldiers were fighting good. They were loading and firing and loading and firing. But 35 or 40 of them on gray horses bolted off the ridge. They went down into the ravine, and we killed them all. 28 dead men found after the battle in a heap at the bottom of this trail, buried in a crack in the earth. E Company, the Gray Horse Troop. Back up on the hill, 20-year-old Cheyenne Wooden Leg. It looked like 1,000 dogs in a fight. Low Dog. The soldiers kept fighting, but then they threw their big guns on the ground, and they took out their little guns, and they tried to kill us, but they shot wildly in the sky as their horses bucked and shied and pulled them all around. A desperate order: shoot your horse. Boom! A bullet in your horse's head. 39 dead horses found around the monument. You're not going home now. You just shot your transportation. You're hiding behind horse flesh. There's nowhere to run to. And by God, there's nowhere to hide. Warriors get closer and closer. They asked Gall 10 years after the battle, how long did the fight last? He said about as long as it takes for a hungry man to eat his dinner. And then the shots boom, quit coming. Boys and old men watching in the draws and the ravines, mounted their horses, stormed up the hill, rode right into the crowd of survivors and pounded them to death. Then they raced down to meet Reno and Benteen, who had made a feeble effort to advance to the sound of the gunfire, drove them back, pinned them down, trapped them under siege for the next 24 hours. Benteen will step up for a shell-shocked Reno. It's a groundhog case, men. It's do or die. Dig rifle pits now. And they began to scratch and claw at the ground with cups and spoons and pocket knives in their hands. Those rifle pits are still there. 24 hours later, the massive village begins to break up and scatter to the south as they detect the oncoming advancing column of Gibbon and Terry from the north. And by the time the sun goes down, June 26th, 1876, there's only a handful of warriors in sight. Benteen, with courage and 24,000 rounds of ammunition, has saved 350 on that hill to the south. 263 are dead. Between 60 and 100 warriors have been killed in this battle, maybe more. We'll never know. And the Battle of the Little Bighorn is over. Today, it's quiet. It's peaceful. The battle's over. The war's over. The Indian Memorial on top of the hill has done much to heal the bitterness and anger and hostility that existed for years here. Today it's quiet. There's a spirituality. It's hallowed ground. I live on the battlefield just beyond the cemetery as a ranger in ranger housing. Sometimes I'm the only person here when the sun goes down. Sometimes I'll take a walk late at night. About a month ago, the moon was bigger than I'd ever seen it. I walked up to Last Stand Hill. I could read the names on the monument. It's a spiritual place. I felt it. I feel it every day. And I hope in some small way, ladies and gentlemen, by attending our presentation here this morning, you've been introduced to the Battle of the Little Bighorn, but more importantly, you've connected with the spirit that exists here.